When a legendary mercenary witch breaks an unbreakable ward for the enemy, he never expected to find his fated mate among the wolves he was hired to destroy. Now Luna, the fierce beta of the Moonstone pack, must choose between her loyalty to her pack and the dangerous pull of a bond that could either save them all or be their ultimate downfall. Prologue. The air in the valley tasted of blood and ozone. Luna moved through the chaos as she was trained to, a shadow of gray fur and fury, all instinct and lethal precision. She was beta of the Moonstone pack, a warrior born of the northern mountains, and this was her territory, her home. The invaders from the Shadow Claw pack were learning the price of trespassing. Her jaws snapped shut on the leg of a wiry black wolf, and she threw him into the path of Gamma Cole's charge without breaking stride. They fought as one entity, a wave of disciplined rage against a tide of snarling ambition. They were winning, until a keening sound, almost too high for even her lupin ears, sliced through the din of battle. It was the sound of their last defense screaming. The ward. Woven by Lyra and the witches of Ravencrest, the magical barrier was meant to be their fortress wall, a shimmering shield against enemy magic. Now it flickered like a dying candle, its protective hum warped into a desperate shriek. Luna's head snapped towards the source. Her sharp eyes, accustomed to spotting threats from a mile away, cut through the melee to a rocky outcrop overlooking the battlefield. It wasn't a coven, it was one man. He stood apart from the fighting, untouched by the blood and mud, a figure of calm, focused intensity. He wasn't wielding a weapon, he was wielding magic itself. His hands moved with an artist's grace, weaving and unweaving strands of pure energy that Luna could feel in her teeth. With every deliberate gesture, he dismantled their salvation. He was devastatingly handsome, his face cast in arrogant, intelligent lines, his expression one of pure, professional concentration. And as she watched him systematically destroy her home, a howl ripped through her mind. It was not a sound of rage. It was a cataclysmic, soul-deep cry of recognition that shattered her world. Her wolf, the primal, possessive beast that lived within her, rose up and screamed a single, undeniable word. Mine. The sheer force of the claim rocked her, her muscles locked. The battle faded to a muted roar. He was the enemy. He was the reason her pack was bleeding, and he was the other half of her soul. As if he'd heard the silent, spiritual roar, he looked up. His eyes, a startling, piercing shade she couldn't define, locked with hers. For a breathtaking second, the world stopped. Surprise flickered across his face, pure and unguarded. And then his magic faltered. The piercing shriek of the ward softened, the shimmering barrier momentarily solidifying as his concentration broke. He saw her. He felt her. Her wolf howled again, a triumphant, possessive sound. Mate. A snarl to her right broke the spell. A shadow claw brute, seeing her frozen, lunged for her throat. Instinct took over. Luna ducked, spun, and met the attack with the full force of her beta strength, her fangs sinking into the attacker's shoulder and silencing him with a brutal efficiency. The fight was over in seconds. Her heart pounding with a feeling far more terrifying than battle lust, she whipped her head back to the outcrop. He was gone. Vanished into the day, as if he were nothing but smoke. The battle raged on, and Luna threw herself back into it, her movements now fueled by a new, desperate fury. Alpha Damon's victory cry echoed through the mountains an hour later, but for Luna it rang hollow. The war was over, but hers had just begun. Surrounded by her pack, her family, she had never felt so devastatingly alone. Her wolf, it had called for its mate, and the universe had answered, only to snatch him away, leaving a cavernous ache where completion should have been. Chapter 1. The Longest Year. 1 year. 12 full cycles of the moon since we crushed the Shadow Claw invasion. 12 months since Damon's victory cry echoed off these peaks. An entire year since I last saw him. The pack had healed. The seasons had turned. We were stronger, more fortified, our alliances solidified. On the surface, I was the pillar I had always been. Beta Luna Ashworth, intelligence coordinator, elite warrior, the Alpha's sharp and steady right hand. But a year is a long time to keep a storm leashed. Your hair's getting long. I paused, my hand midway through tying the dark strands back from my face. It now fell past my shoulders, a stark contrast to the close-cropped, functional cut I'd maintained for years. Cole Rivers, my Gamma and Damon's cousin, stood in the doorway of the strategy room, his arms crossed, his gaze relentlessly suspicious. "I hadn't noticed," I lied coolly, twisting the hair into a severe knot. "We have," he grunted. "Marcus and I, you're different, Luna, ever since that battle." He wasn't wrong. Marcus, ever the diplomat, had approached me weeks ago. "You seem distant," he'd said gently, his eyes full of genuine concern. "Is everything all right?" I had assured him, just as I assured Cole now, "I'm fine. The pack is secure, that's all that matters." I left him standing in the doorway, unable to explain that the woman who wore her authority like a blade now had a weakness. I couldn't tell them that my wolf, once calm, now spent her days in a state of restlessness, agonizing anticipation for the night. And I certainly couldn't tell them why I was letting my hair grow. I barely understood it myself, except that in the one place I felt whole, the phantom in my dreams seemed to like it that way. My duties took me to the main courtyard, where a new shipment of silver was being logged for the armory. The task was mundane, a welcome distraction until I saw them. Damon and his mate, Iris, were watching their niece, Christine, as she practiced basic forms with a wooden sword. At 10, she was a fierce little thing, a perfect blend of her parents, Alpha Raphael and Luna Diana of the Nightshade pack. Damon corrected her stance, his voice firm but full of pride. Iris laughed, her head resting on his shoulder for a moment. They were a perfect unit, a portrait of fated love. The sight was a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. A whole year I had watched their happiness, Marcus and Lyra's devotion, and 100 other mated pairs in the pack, all while my own other half was a ghost. A handsome, hated, enemy ghost. "Mine," my wolf growled, a deeply possessive, painful rumble. I finished my duties on autopilot, the need for solitude a cloying imperative. As dusk began to bleed purple and orange across the sky, I made my pilgrimage to the hidden hot springs. The ritual was as familiar and necessary as breathing. Sinking into the steaming water, I let the heat chase the ever-present chill from my bones. I leaned my head back, the silence of the cavern a welcome embrace. It didn't take long. Sleep, which had once been my enemy, was now my most treasured escape. The dream started, as it always did. The world behind my eyes softened into a swirling silver mist. And then came the feeling, a deep, resonant hum of power that silenced the chaos in my mind. My wolf, who had been agitated all day, stretched out with a contented sigh. He was here. His figure emerged from the fog, tall and broad-shouldered. I could never see his face in perfect detail, but I knew its handsome lines by heart. I knew the scent of ozone and ancient magic that clung to him. A year of these nightly visits had made him the most familiar presence in my life. He moved towards me, and I felt the phantom touch of his fingers stroking my long hair, which was inexplicably unbound and free in this dreamscape. A voice that was not a voice resonated through my soul. "Beautiful." My wolf purred, basking in the approval. He knelt before me, his presence a shield against the world. He never hurt me. He never demanded anything. He simply was, a powerful, possessive, calming anchor in the violent sea of my loneliness. Here, in this space between worlds, I was not a beta with a duty. I was just Luna, and I was his. I woke with a soft gasp, the last vestiges of the dream clinging to me like warmth. The deep, satisfying peace settled over me, a balm on my frayed soul. My wolf was calm, content. This was how I survived. This was how I faced another day. It was a fantasy, a desperate delusion my mind had concocted to keep from splintering apart. I knew that. But as I dressed and walked back toward the fortress under a canopy of stars, I ran my fingers through my damp hair. It was stupid, this secret addiction to a dream. Chapter 2. An offer from a stranger. The peace my dream afforded me shattered before dawn. A sharp, urgent rap on my door was followed by the voice of a junior warrior. "Alpha's orders, Beta. Council room. Now." The air in the fortress was already thick with tension. This was a summons, the kind that preceded bad news. I found Marcus already there, standing beside Alpha Damon at the massive stone map table that dominated the room. Marcus, my fellow beta, gave me a tight, grim nod. His amber eyes, usually calm and diplomatic, were dark with worry. Damon didn't waste time on pleasantries. His presence filled the room, the raw power that had earned him the name the storm barely contained. "The Silver Creek pack is gone," he said, his voice a low rumble of restrained fury. The words landed like stones in the silence. The Silver Creek pack were our allies to the east, a sturdy, if smaller, pack. "Gone?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Raided, dispersed." "Wiped out," Damon clarified, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of the table. "Their scouts found the settlement this morning. No survivors. Their alpha, they found what was left of him pinned to his own door." A cold dread seeped into my bones, more chilling than any mountain winter. This wasn't the work of a rival pack fighting for territory. This was an extermination. "It gets worse," Marcus added, his gaze flicking to the doorway. "Lyra, come in." His mate entered, and the scent of lavender and ancient magic filled the stone chamber. Lyra, a powerful witch from the Ravencrest Coven, had been a godsend since her mating with Marcus. Today, however, her usual serene expression was gone, replaced by a deep, troubled furrow in her brow. "The wards," Lyra said, her voice strained. "Their entire defensive perimeter was magical. I felt the echoes when they fell." She took a shuddering breath. "It was sophisticated, frighteningly so. The magical signature is unlike anything I've ever felt. It's not the raw power of a coven, nor the focused energy of a battle mage. This was intricate, layered. The wards weren't just broken, they were deconstructed, their own power turned against them in a cascade failure. It was an act of demolition, disguised as artistry. "The magic is unknown," she stated firmly. "I've already consulted with Selene. It matches no known practitioner or coven. This is someone new, someone with a terrifying level of knowledge." "So we're fighting a ghost," Damon growled. "How do we defend against magic we don't even understand?" "We don't," Lyra said softly, and all eyes fell on her. "We can't. Not on our own. To fight this, we don't just need power, we need a specialist. We need a diagnostician. Someone whose knowledge of arcane architecture is unparalleled. A master craftsman who can look at the ruins of a magical structure and tell us exactly how it was destroyed." A heavy silence filled the room. The kind of expert Lyra was describing was not a common ally. "There is a legend," she said hesitantly. "More myth than man to most. A freelance witch who operates on contract. He has no coven, no allegiance. He is said to be the single greatest mind in the creation and dismantling of magical wards and enchantments in the world. They call him the Artificer." "He's not a battle mage in the traditional sense," Lyra clarified, seeing the look on Damon's face. "He doesn't just throw raw power around. He's a precision instrument hired for specific, complex magical objectives, whether that's building a defense or, as we know, tearing one down. His primary service is his intellect. He consults. He analyzes, for a price. His client list is not reputable, but his expertise is undeniable. If anyone can look at the magical rubble of the Silver Creek wards and tell us who our enemy is and how to stop them, it is him." "A mercenary," Damon stated flatly. "A necessary one, Damon," Marcus countered, his strategic mind clearly seeing Lyra's logic. "We are facing an unknown. We need knowledge, and this witch sells it." Damon looked at me, his gaze hard as mountain stone. The unspoken question was clear. Can we afford to trust someone like that? I nodded. Damon slammed his palm on the table, the sound cracking through the tense silence. "Find him," he commanded. "Get him here, name his price." Chapter 3. The Devil at the Gates. The wait was a taut wire of anticipation stretched over 3 days. The entire fortress was on alert, the warriors restless. Sage Winters, our best tracker, finally made the call on the 3rd day, a lone figure approaching from the South Pass. No pack sent, no hostile intent detected, just a hum of power so profound that Sage said it felt like the air itself was vibrating around him. He was here. I stood on the upper gallery overlooking the main hall, my usual place for observing pack matters. It gave me a strategic vantage point, and today it felt like a shield. Below, Alpha Damon and Beta Marcus positioned themselves in the center of the vast stone floor. They stood as pillars of the pack, ready to greet the storm. The massive wooden gates, reinforced with iron and silver, groaned open. They revealed a slice of the blindingly bright, snow-covered world, and against it, a single dark figure. It was him, the man from the outcrop, the ghost from my dreams, the enemy who held the other half of my soul. He walked through the threshold, and a hush fell over the hall. The man who entered our fortress was elegance and danger given form. He wore a tailored black wool coat that flowed around him as he moved, fitted perfectly over a dark gray shirt and trousers that bespoke quiet wealth. He moved with an effortless, fluid grace that spoke of centuries of confidence. His hair was the same dark shade I remembered, and his face, it was even more devastatingly handsome than my memory or my dreams had allowed. Sharp, intelligent lines, a strong jaw, and a mouth that looked equally suited to a charming smile or a cruel sneer. He didn't walk like a visitor. He walked like he owned the ground beneath his feet. His aura of ancient power was a palpable force, pressing in on the room, silencing whispers and stilling movement. The seasoned warriors lining the hall, men who faced down rogue bears and rival packs without flinching, shifted uncomfortably. They knew, on a primal level, that they were in the presence of a predator of a different order. Damon and Marcus met him in the center of the room. I saw my alpha's posture stiffen, a rare sign of him being faced with power that could rival his own. "Kaelin, I presume," Damon said, his voice level and laced with authority. "I am Alpha Damon Blackthorn." The witch Kaelin gave a slight, almost lazy incline of his head, a gesture of respect that was somehow still dismissive. "Alpha," he greeted, his voice a smooth, deep baritone that vibrated through the stone and up my spine. "A pleasure. Your reputation precedes you." His eyes flickered to Marcus. "Beta Marcus." "Lyra, my mate, has spoken of your skills," Marcus said, his tone clipped and wary. "Has she?" Kaelin's lips curved into a charming smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm flattered. My services, as she no doubt mentioned, are not without cost." As they spoke, every fiber of my being screamed. My wolf, silent and restless for a year, rose up in a singular, overwhelming tidal wave of emotion. It was not a thought. It was a visceral, soul-deep certainty that eclipsed everything else. Mine. The possessive, triumphant howl ripped through my mind with such force I staggered back a step, my hand flying to the stone railing to steady myself. And as if he'd heard the silent scream across the echoing hall, his polite conversation with Damon faltered. His head lifted. The charming facade dropped, replaced by a focused intensity. His eyes, a startling, piercing shade of crystalline blue I now remembered with perfect clarity, scanned the hall, skipping over warriors and guards as if they were mere furniture. Then they found me. They locked with mine, and the entire world, the entire fortress, simply ceased to exist. There was only the magnetic, terrifying pull of his gaze. Surprise flickered there for the barest second, the same surprise I'd seen a year ago on the battlefield. But it was instantly replaced by something else, something far more dangerous. A slow, knowing smirk played on his lips. It was not a friendly gesture. It was a look of ownership. His gaze roamed over me, from the long hair I had unconsciously grown for him down to my boots, with an intensity so proprietary it felt like a physical touch. It was a look that said he knew every secret I had. It stripped me bare, beta, warrior, and woman, and laid claim to all of it. A shiver of pure, unadulterated desire shot through me, followed swiftly by a wave of cold dread. He knew. From across the hall, with a single, devastating look, he confirmed my deepest fear and my most desperate hope. He already knew I was his. Chapter 4, A Private Negotiation. My hand gripped the cold stone railing of the gallery, my knuckles white. Below, the tension in the hall slowly eased as Marcus began leading Kaelin toward the guest wing. Damon had already retreated to his office, his mind no doubt churning with strategy. Warriors exchanged uneasy glances before returning to their duties. For them, the spectacle was over. For me, it had just begun. My world had tilted on its axis. That single, possessive smirk had been a declaration. He knew. My wolf, which had been howling in triumph, was now snarling, demanding action. Confront him, claim him, mark him. The primal instincts were a raging tide, threatening to drown the years of disciplined control that defined Beta Luna Ashworth. I couldn't let him walk away, not after that look. Pushing off the railing, I moved, my steps silent and swift on the stone. I shadowed them down the long, torchlit corridor, the ancient tapestries depicting forgotten battles seeming to watch me pass. Marcus stopped at a heavy oak door at the end of the hall, spoke a few brief, formal words to Kaelin, and then turned. He nodded to me as he passed, his expression a mixture of concern and warning. "Be careful," his eyes said. I ignored it. The time for caution was over. Kaelin hadn't yet entered his chambers. He stood with his back to me, his head tilted as if examining the door's ironwork. I knew it was a pose. He could feel my presence, a wolf stalking its prey. The air between us crackled. I didn't give him the chance to turn and offer another infuriatingly charming smile. Closing the distance in 3 long strides, I shoved him. Hard. My rage, a year of frustration, loneliness, and betrayal, fueled the assault. He stumbled forward, his body hitting the cold stone wall with a solid thud. I was on him in an instant, my forearm pressed hard against his throat, my other hand braced against his chest. I crowded him, using my shifter strength to pin him, my face inches from his. "You," I snarled, my voice a low, guttural growl that was more wolf than woman. The beta was gone. The fierce, animalistic warrior had taken her place. "The Shadow Claw attack, you were with them. You stood on that ridge and were tearing our wards apart. Why?" He didn't struggle. He didn't even flinch. The polite guest from the hall vanished, replaced by something ancient and utterly immovable. His crystalline blue eyes looked down at me with an unnerving, calm intensity that absorbed my fury like a void. "A contract is a contract, little wolf," he said, his voice a low, smooth vibration against my arm. "The Shadow Claw Pack paid for my expertise in dismantling the Ravencrest Coven's warding scheme. It was a technical challenge, nothing personal." "Nothing personal," I spat, pressing harder, my claws threatening to break through my skin. "I saw packmates die because of your technical challenge." "And I saw you," he interrupted, his voice dropping even lower, laced with a raw intensity that silenced me. "In the middle of the chaos, a gray flash of fur and fury. I saw you, and for the first time in centuries, my magic faltered. The ward stabilized because my concentration shattered." He held my gaze, his eyes boring into mine. The bond flared to life, a supernova in a quiet universe. I felt it, the call of my mate. My breath hitched. My arm trembled, the pressure against his throat lessening for a heart-stopping second. "Let me be perfectly clear," he continued, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "I wasn't retreating from the battle. I was retreating from you. I could not, would not, continue to fight on the side opposing my mate." "The past year," I whispered, the fight draining out of me, my rage replaced by a dizzying confusion. "Was busy," he said, a flicker of something dark and ruthless in his eyes. "Severing old contracts is an expensive and often bloody business. I had to clean my slate. I had to ensure that when I came to you, no other obligation, no other enemy would follow me to your door." He shifted his weight, and with an effortless surge of power that threw my senses into chaos, our positions were reversed. Suddenly, I was the one pressed against the cold stone wall, his body caging me in. His hands were braced on either side of my head, his powerful frame a hair's breadth from mine. He was stronger, faster, and I had never felt so utterly overpowered. The scent of ozone and something ancient and uniquely him filled my lungs, overwhelming my senses. "So yes," he murmured, his lips dangerously close to my ear, his breath warm against my skin. "I am here to fulfill the Moonstone Pack's contract. I will find your ghost, and I will help you build a defense against them. But make no mistake about my true price." His gaze dropped to my lips, then met my eyes again, intense and proprietary. "I'm here for you." Chapter 5. Acclaim. The next few days were strange and tense. Kaelin worked on our fortress defenses, and I had to admit he was brilliant. He moved with a quiet confidence, weaving new spells into our existing wards. He didn't just add power, he found the weakest points and made them strong. He worked with magic the way a master builder works with stone, and a part of me, the beta in charge of security, couldn't help but be impressed. He was trying to earn my trust in small ways, too. I came back from a long, cold patrol one afternoon, bone-tired and aching. When I entered my quarters, a single steaming mug was on my table. It was a rare herbal tea from the southern lands, one I hadn't tasted in years. Its scent alone soothed my frayed nerves. There was no note, but I knew. I knew it was from him. The gesture was quiet, thoughtful, and it confused me more than any of his intense stares. But the truce my heart was trying to make with my head was shattered during pack dinner that night. The main hall was loud and warm, a welcome feeling after a long day. I was talking with some warriors when a younger one, Reese, sat next to me. He was nice enough, but he leaned in a little too close, his voice a little too familiar. I was getting ready to politely, but firmly put him in his place, my duty as beta. Before I could say a word, the air around us turned icy cold. The torches near Reese flickered, their warm orange flames turning a pale, ghostly blue. Reese shivered, his breath turning to mist in front of him. He looked around in fear, and then his eyes landed across the room. Kalen was watching us. He didn't move a muscle, but his blue eyes gleamed in the dim light with a silent, lethal warning. Reese scrambled to his feet, mumbled a quick apology to me, and hurried away. The warmth and light returned to our table as if nothing had happened, but my face was burning with anger. Kalen had no right. I found him in the library later, looking at a map of our territory. I shut the heavy door behind me, the sound echoing in the quiet room. "That was you," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "You don't get to do that. Those are my pack members. I handle them." Kalen finally looked up from the map, his face calm. His intentions were not respectful. I gave him a warning. "I don't need you to protect me," I shot back. "You are a contractor, Kalen, a guest. You will not use your power on my people." He moved from behind the table in a smooth, silent motion. He walked toward me until I had to tilt my head back to look at him. He was so close I could feel the energy humming off him. "I am much more than a guest, Luna, and you know it," he said, his voice low and soft. "And what is mine, I protect." "I am not yours," I insisted, though my heart hammered in my chest and my wolf purred in agreement with him. I hated it. I hated how my own body betrayed me. He leaned in closer, his intense gaze holding me captive. He braced his hands on the tall bookshelf behind me, trapping me in his space. The scent of him, like a coming storm, was all around me. "Anyone who looks at you with hunger will get a warning," he whispered, his eyes full of a dark promise. "You are mine, Luna. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." A shiver of pure, thrilling desire ran through me, and it made me even angrier. I shoved his chest with both hands. It was like pushing against a stone wall, but he let me move him back a step. "Stay away from me," I ordered, my voice unsteady. I turned and fled the library, my heart pounding with a war of feelings. My mind knew he was arrogant and controlling. He was our former enemy, but my wolf and my soul sang a different song, a song that said I was finally home, and I didn't know how to fight them both.
Chapter 6. The Artificer and the Alpha. The magical signature was a mockery of my life's work. For 3 days, I had secluded myself with the cursed sliver of wood from the Silver Creek attack. Its intricate, layered energy was a puzzle box I could not open. In my long life, I had prided myself on knowing the craft of magic inside and out. I had studied texts lost for decades, dueled with mages of every discipline, and built a reputation on the simple fact that I could understand and dismantle any enchantment. Until now. This magic was different. It was elegant, precise, and utterly alien. It wasn't the work of any known coven or rogue. It felt forgotten, like a language no one had spoken for generations, yet here it was, used with masterful fluency. For the first time since I was a young, arrogant apprentice, I felt like I was staring into a void of knowledge. A deeply unsettling feeling. A knock at the door pulled me from my brooding. It was Marcus, the beta. "The Alpha requires you in the training yard." I understood immediately. The pack needed to see what they had invited into their home. They needed a measure of my power. It was a necessary political move, and I didn't mind. It also presented an opportunity to interact with Luna in a way she couldn't refuse, a conversation in the language of pure power. When I saw her in the yard, standing beside her alpha, a fierce smile lit up her face at Damon's command. She thought this was her chance to vent her frustrations, to prove she was my equal. I found her spirit exhilarating. She had no idea how much I agreed with her. She shifted, and the raw beauty of the change held me captive. The disciplined beta vanished, replaced by the great gray wolf who had haunted my thoughts for a year. Power rolled off her in waves, a perfect storm of instinct and strength. When Damon gave the signal, she exploded toward me. The pack saw a fight. I experienced a revelation. I met her first furious charge with a simple shield of golden light. The impact was immense, a physical shockwave of her will slamming into mine. I held it firm, letting her feel my unyielding strength. I needed her to know, on a primal level, that her rage would not break me, that she was safe to unleash it. Then our dance began. She was a whirlwind of clever attacks, using her speed and strength with deadly intelligence, and I moved with her. My shields were not walls to cage her, but partners in her dance. They flowed and curved, deflecting her without punishment. My magic, which for my entire life had been a solitary tool, now had a counterpart. Her raw, primal energy and my refined ancient power, we were two halves of a whole. This was the magnificent creature who had called to my soul. This ferocity, this untamed spirit, was not a thing to be broken. It was a thing to be cherished. A deep, resounding pride echoed through me. She gathered herself for one last spectacular assault. She soared through the air, a tempest of fur and fangs. I enclosed myself in a perfect dome of energy at the last second. Her claws screeched against the barrier, just inches from my face. Through the shimmering gold, I met the furious eyes of her wolf. In that moment, I let her feel everything through our bond. Not my power, not my control, but my absolute awe. "You are incredible," I sent to her, a feeling instead of a thought. "This strength is your crown. Wear it." I felt her wolf's rage stutter, silenced by a wave of stunned confusion. "Enough!" Damon's command broke the spell. I released the dome, and she stumbled forward as she shifted back to her human form. She was breathing heavily, her body tired, but her eyes, when they met mine, were changed. The anger was gone, replaced by a wary, breathless wonder. I stepped toward her, ignoring the stunned silence of the pack. I only saw her. I reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from her cheek. The brief touch was electric. "You are magnificent," I said, and the words were the truest I had ever spoken. The puzzle of our enemy was a frustrating void. But as I looked at the beautiful, powerful, and conflicted woman before me, I knew I had just made progress on the only puzzle that truly mattered in my long life.
Chapter 7. A Pack Divided. I was summoned to the strategy room. The second I stepped inside, I felt the tension cut through the air like a blade. Damon stood at the head of the stone table, a thundercloud barely held at bay. Beside him, Iris sat with calm dignity, silent but powerful. Her presence usually grounded me, not today. Marcus and Lyra were already seated. Cole stood apart, arms folded, his face unreadable but tight with restraint. Damon's gaze locked on mine. "Luna," he said, voice low and weighted with authority. "We're here to talk about the witch." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "What exactly is he to you?" Before I could answer, Cole stepped in, his voice calm but edged with something more dangerous, concern. "Loon, you need to understand who he is," he began, placing a leather folder down on the table. He opened it slowly. "He's been tied to mercenary circles for years. Vampires, rogue packs, slavers. Not just rumors, documented spells, evidence of paid destruction. He's good at what he does, but what he does isn't good." He met my eyes then. "I'm not accusing anyone, but you need to keep your distance, Luna. He is not someone you can afford to trust, not in this house, not in this pack. We paid for his service, but nothing more." His tone wasn't angry. It was respectful, almost pleading. That made it worse. My heart twisted. I wanted to defend Kaelin. My wolf needed to, but I couldn't deny what Cole was saying. I had seen the darkness in Kaelin's eyes. I had felt the threat beneath his skin. And suddenly, trust, so foundational to a wolf's nature, felt foreign. The room was silent. Cole stepped back, saying no more. I could feel the others watching me, waiting for me to speak. Even Marcus, usually a rock of quiet support, looked away. My wolf stirred in protest, a protective growl rising deep within, but I couldn't allow it. Not here. Not after this. I forced the instinct back, shut it behind a wall I didn't know I had the strength to build. My wolf fell silent, locked away by my own hand. I looked down, ashamed, my voice barely more than a whisper. He's my mate. Silence. Cole's eyes closed just for a second. Marcus looked stunned. But Iris, her reaction was different. Her eyes softened, not in shock but in understanding. A flicker of empathy passed between us and I clung to it. Lyra's voice broke the quiet. "Damon," she said gently, "may I?" Damon nodded. Lyra turned toward the table, her voice calm, precise. "A witch's bond isn't like ours, but it is no less real. When it forms, it is absolute, rare, yes, but deep. The soul doesn't ask permission when it resonates." I swallowed, hard. Her words mirrored the storm I hadn't been able to put into language. "Kalen may be many things," she continued, her voice firm, "but he's no longer entirely his own. Not after this bond. Loyalty for people like him is never freely given, but it can be forged painfully when the soul demands it." Her words were meant to comfort, and they did slightly, but not enough. The wall inside me stayed up. My wolf remained behind it. I couldn't let her out. Not until I knew for sure this wasn't all just some illusion, some trick of fate. Damon's face remained unreadable. He looked at Iris for a long moment, then nodded once. "This council is adjourned," he said. The others filed out, leaving me alone in the silence I had created. Alone, except for the wolf I had locked away.
Chapter 8. The Unseen Wall. I had been dismissed. I was not summoned for rest of the day. I was not worried. I was, in fact, cautiously optimistic. The last time I had been with Luna in the heat of our training, a bridge had been formed. I had felt the respect in her, the awe of her wolf. I had shown her that my power was not a threat to her, but a match for her. I believed it was a turning point. I assumed the council meeting was a formality, a political necessity for her pack. I waited for her to seek me out, for the quiet negotiation between us to resume. I found her near the armory, overseeing an inventory of silver blades. I approached her, a rare, soft smile on my lips, ready to finally break the silence. "Luna," she turned, and the woman who looked back at me was a stranger. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by a glacial calm. The wary respect had been replaced by a distant, impenetrable shield. She looked, not at me, but through me, as if I were a ghost. "Is there something you require, Kalen?" she asked. Her voice was the clipped, formal tone of a beta addressing a subordinate. All the warmth, all the connection we had shared, had vanished. I was so taken aback, I could not speak for a moment. I had hoped we could talk," I finally managed. "My duties are extensive today," she said, turning back to the weapons rack. "If you have a request concerning your work, please submit it through the proper channels." Dismissed. Utterly and completely. I retreated, my mind reeling. What had happened? What had I missed? I replayed our last encounter in the training yard 100 times. The energy, the connection, her breathless awe, it had been real. I was certain of it. What could have possibly changed in the space of a single meeting I wasn't even present for? The confusion was a maddening itch under my skin. I thrive on information, on understanding the mechanics of a situation. Here I had nothing. It was like trying to analyze a spell with no components, no incantation, no residue, just a baffling, painful result. I sought refuge in my work, the one place where logic still reigned. I poured my energy and focus into the shadowy magic of our enemy, the effort draining me until my bones ached. The fatigue was a welcome blanket, muffling the sharp edges of my frustration. Magic at least followed rules. It could be understood. I tried to approach her again that evening. I saw her on a high balcony, a solitary figure outlined against the vast starry sky. I needed an answer. I could not exist in this void of not knowing. "What happened?" I asked, forgoing any greeting. My voice was more raw than I intended. She didn't turn to face me. "The Alpha is still deliberating." "I am not talking about the Alpha," I said, stepping closer. "I'm talking about you, about us. In the yard I felt—" "You felt nothing," she cut in, her voice sharp with a pain she quickly suppressed. She finally turned, and the sorrow in her eyes was a knife to the gut. I made a mistake. I allowed a display of power to cloud my judgment. My duty is to this pack, and that is all. I do not believe you, I said, searching her face for the woman I had connected with. The bond between us, the bond, she choked out, a bitter, broken sound. The bond doesn't change anything. I can't have a mate I can't trust. Before I could ask what she meant, she swept past me and was gone, leaving me alone with her cryptic, painful words. I stood under the cold light of the moon, more lost than I had ever been in my long life. I had built and broken magical fortresses, advised powerful leaders, and faced down terrifying foes. But this unseen wall she had erected between us, built of reasons I could not fathom and a pain I did not understand, it was an enemy I had no idea how to fight.
Chapter 9. Cracks in the Ice. I built a wall of ice around my heart, and my duties as beta were the stones. I threw myself into my work with a ferocity that left the pack's warriors breathless and my own mind blessedly numb. I coordinated patrols, drilled the new recruits until they dropped, and spent my nights reviewing intelligence reports until the words blurred. Anything to avoid the hollow ache in my chest. Anything to avoid him. My wolf was in a state of sullen, resentful silence. It hated me for turning my back on our mate, but even it could not argue with the facts Cole had laid bare. A man who had worked for slavers and destroyed shifter sanctuaries was not a man we could trust. The bond was not a blessing. It was a curse, a chain linking me to a past stained with blood. My anger at him was matched only by my anger at fate itself. But he was a persistent, unavoidable presence. He had buried himself in his work, a mirror of my own desperate activity. He rarely left the study that Damon had given him. Warriors on guard duty near that corridor would speak of the strange lights and the low hum of power that emanated from it at all hours. They spoke of the witch with a mixture of fear and awe. I told myself it was for the best. Let him work. He was a tool we were using, and he owed us his expertise. But I saw the toll it was taking. I would catch glimpses of him on his rare trips to the mess hall. The confident, arrogant man who had walked into our fortress was fading. He was paler, thinner. Dark circles, like bruises, were forming under his impossibly blue eyes. There was a faint tremor in his hands that he tried to hide. He was running himself into the ground. Lyra cornered me one afternoon near the healer's den. "Luna, you need to talk to him," she said, her voice tight with worry. "The magic he is trying to analyze is incredibly draining. He is pushing himself to the brink. No one can sustain that level of output without consequence, not even him." "He is doing the job he was contracted for," I said, my voice colder than I intended. I walked away from her, my heart hammering. I told myself I didn't care. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself walking the silent corridors of the fortress. A faint light from under the door of his study drew me in against my will. I pushed the heavy door open just a crack and peered inside. The sight broke through my wall of ice. He wasn't working. He had fallen asleep, slumped over a table covered in ancient books and glowing crystals. His head was pillowed on his arm, his face slack with a deep, profound exhaustion that he never showed when he was awake. The powerful, dangerous witch looked vulnerable. The angry growl of my wolf softened into a low, mournful whine. The instinct to go to him, to smooth the hair from his brow and cover him with a warm fur, was so powerful it made me ache. He was a monster. He was my mate. He was destroying himself. My mind warred with my heart. I couldn't go to him. I couldn't speak to him. But I couldn't just walk away and leave him like this. I retreated silently. I went not to my own room, but to the healer's stores. I found what I was looking for, a small pouch of dried herbs, crushed moon petal, silver root, and sungrass, a powerful tonic used to help magic users restore their energy reserves. Returning to his study, my heart pounding with the fear of being discovered, I quietly placed a tray just inside the door. On it, I put a flask of fresh water, a piece of bread and cheese, and the small pouch of herbs. It was an anonymous offering, a gesture I could deny. I told myself I was only doing it for the pack. We needed our weapons sharp, not broken. But as I crept back to my own cold bed, I knew I was lying. I had seen his vulnerability, and I had not been able to turn away.
Chapter 10. The anonymous gift. A dull ache in my neck woke me. I lifted my head, my cheek creased from the ancient leather of the book I'd used as a pillow. The crystals on the table had dimmed, their captured energy expended. Another night of work with nothing to show for it but exhaustion and the lingering cold ghost of the enemy's magic in my mind. The frustration was a familiar, bitter taste. It was the scent that cut through the stale air of the study. Fresh bread, clean water, and something else, herbs. My eyes focused on a simple wooden tray just inside the door. I hadn't put it there. I rose stiffly, my joints protesting, and walked toward it. It must have been Lyra. It was a kind, logical gesture from a fellow magic user. I prepared the tonic and drank it down. The magic was clean and strong, chasing the chill from my bones and clearing the fog from my mind. As the warmth spread through me, so did a new resolve. Lyra was right. I could not defeat our enemy by destroying myself. I needed to be strong, not just for the pack, but for her. The next day, I made myself leave the study. I ate a full meal in the mess hall and walked the fortress battlements, forcing my magic to settle and my body to recover. In the main courtyard, I saw her. She was drilling a unit of warriors, her voice sharp and commanding. She was magnificent. She must have felt my gaze, because she turned and her eyes met mine from across the yard. The coldness was still there, her public mask firmly in place. I didn't smile. I didn't approach. I simply gave her a slow, deliberate nod. A silent acknowledgement. I wanted to respect her boundary, even if it killed me. For a single breathtaking moment, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Acknowledgement. Then she turned away, her voice sharp as she called out another command to her warriors.
Chapter 11. Forged in Fire. The next day, I saw him walking the battlements. He looked stronger, the deep lines of exhaustion on his face lessened. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Does he know it was me? Our eyes met across the courtyard. He looked at me, his expression unreadable, and gave a brief, formal nod before continuing his walk. A wave of profound, complicated relief washed over me. He didn't know. My secret was safe. The wall between us was still standing. I told myself I was glad. This distance was necessary. That fragile, self-deceiving relief was shattered by the sound that every shifter dreads. The warning horns blared, a deep, desperate cry that echoed off the mountains. It was not a drill. It was a full-scale assault. All internal conflict vanished, replaced by the cold, clear focus of a beta at war. I raced to the battlements, shouting orders, my mind a whirlwind of tactics and deployments. The scene below was a living nightmare. Dozens of shadowy, magical constructs tore at our warriors, their claws insubstantial yet lethal. Behind them, an army of black-furred wolves, their eyes glowing with a sick purple light of enslavement, slammed against the outer gates in waves of mindless fury. And above it all, curses of black and violet energy hammered our wards, which groaned and buckled under the strain. My eyes scanned the chaos, and I found Kalen. He moved through the fray with an unnatural calm that was more terrifying than any battle rage. He was not just a mage, he was an artist of destruction, and the battlefield was his canvas. With a flick of his wrist, a volley of enemy curses folded in on themselves and vanished. With a whispered word, the earth beneath a squad of the enslaved wolves turned to thick, grasping mud, immobilizing them. He never raised his voice, never wasted a movement. He saw a pack warrior about to be overwhelmed by 3 constructs, and a shield of solid, impenetrable shadow erupted from the ground to protect him. He was a whirlwind of lethal efficiency, his face a mask of cold, professional concentration. I watched, horrified and awestruck, as he fought with the full, terrifying scope of his morally gray power, all of it a furious, protective shield around my home. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel a sliver of hope. With him fighting like this, we could win. That was when the champion appeared. It strode from the enemy ranks, a towering knight made of solidified nightmare, radiating a power that made the very air grow thin and cold. The chaotic battlefield seemed to quiet around it. It ignored everyone else, its eyeless gaze fixing on me. And I saw Kalen change. The cold, detached focus in his eyes shattered, replaced by a flash of raw, primal terror. His magic, which had been precise and controlled, flared wildly around him in an uncontrolled aura of gold and black. He was no longer a calculating artificer. He was a male seeing his mate targeted for death. He tried to move toward me, shouting my name, but the night was faster. It raised a clawed hand, and a bolt of pure, sizzling black energy, a curse of unmaking, shot directly at my heart. Time slowed to a crawl. I saw Marcus yell too far away. I saw Cole's face twist in horror. I knew I was dead. Then, a blur of black and gold. Kalen was there. He appeared in front of me as if from thin air, his back to me, his arms spread wide. He took the full force of the magic himself. The impact was a silent implosion of energy that sucked the sound from the air. He cried out, a raw, agonized sound that ripped through my soul, and his body arched as the black magic consumed him. He fell to his knees, a deep, smoking wound burning through his back. The Nightmare Knight strode forward to deliver the killing blow. A white-hot rage, born of terror and a guilt so profound it choked me, erupted in my chest. I was about to launch myself from the wall, to shift and fight and die beside him, but then he moved. With a guttural roar of pure defiance, Kalen forced himself back to his feet. He staggered, his body trembling with agony. Dark, shadowy tendrils of his own forbidden magic were already seeping into the wound, a desperate, painful healing that was visibly draining the life from him even as it held him together. His power was a guttering candle flame, but it was not yet extinguished. He was wounded, bleeding magic and life, but he was still standing. He was still fighting. The knight swiped at him with its massive claws. Kalen threw up a weak, flickering shield that shattered on impact, sending him stumbling back. He was too weak to fight it alone. Just as the knight reared back for the final strike, a roar of pure alpha fury shook the battlefield. A massive black wolf, Damon, slammed into the creature's side like a thunderbolt, throwing it off balance. My alpha had joined the fight. I didn't hesitate. I leaped from the battlement, shifting into my wolf form before I hit the ground. I landed beside Damon, facing our common enemy. Kalen, breathing in ragged gasps, took his place beside us. We were a trio, the alpha, the beta, and the witch, and we would not be broken. What followed was the most brutal fight of my life. Damon was the unstoppable force, his sheer size and alpha strength a match for the knight's raw power. I was the blade, fast and agile, darting in to tear at the creature's joints and flank whenever Damon created an opening. And Kalen was the linchpin. Grievously wounded, he could no longer unleash devastating spells. Instead, he became the master tactician. He threw up shimmering shields at the last possible second to deflect blows meant for Damon or me. He whispered a single word, and ropes of shadow shot from the ground to momentarily bind the knight's legs. His magic was weakened, but his mind was a razor-sharp weapon, controlling the flow of the battle, keeping us alive. Now, Kalen yelled, his voice strained. He had managed to trap one of the knight's arms in a cage of dark energy. Damon seized the opening, slamming his full weight into the creature's chest. The knight staggered back, its core momentarily exposed. That was all I needed. I lunged forward, sinking my fangs deep into the swirling heart of the shadow. It dissolved with a deafening screech, its power vanishing into nothing. With their champion gone, the will of the attacking army broke. They scattered, rooted by our warriors in a final, triumphant push. The battle was won. And the cost was paid. The moment the fight was over, Kalen's strength gave out completely. He collapsed, his body finally succumbing to the horrific injury and the strain of the dark magic that held him together. I rushed to his side, shifting back as I fell to my knees. My guilt, held at bay by the adrenaline of the fight, came back in a crushing wave. He had fought through a death blow for me, for my pack. I cradled his head in my lap, tears streaming down my face, cutting paths through the dirt and grime. Kalen, no, please. His eyelids fluttered. He was alive. His clouded, pain-filled eyes found mine. He saw the tears tracking down my face. A terrible, weak smile touched his lips. His hand, shaking with an almost impossible effort, lifted. His thumb brushed weakly against my cheek, smearing a tear. His voice was a faint, ragged whisper, barely audible. Worth it. My breath hitched, my heart stopped. At least, he breathed, his gaze holding mine. Now I know. His eyes closed. His hand fell from my face, and he went limp in my arms, a dead weight, pulled into a deep unconsciousness by the magic fighting to save his life. He knew. In his last moment, he knew. "Healer," I screamed, my voice raw with grief and a fierce, new determination. "Somebody help now." Chapter 12. An Alpha's Blessing. The world outside the healer's den was a blur of motion and distant sound. Wounded warriors were tended to, damage reports were compiled, and victory, hard-won and costly, was secured. None of it mattered. My world had shrunk to the size of a single cot, to the quiet, ragged rhythm of Kalen's breathing. For 2 days, I did not leave his side. I sat on a low stool, my hand gripping his, as Victor, our pack's gruff-head healer, worked tirelessly to treat the physical damage of the curse. Lyra was a constant presence as well, her own magic a soft, golden light that helped soothe the volatile, dark energy Kalen had used to save himself. She said he had burned through nearly all of his own life force to fuel that healing, and now he simply had to recover it. I was exhausted, caked in the grime of battle, but I refused to rest. I watched the steady rise and fall of his chest, my guilt a heavy, suffocating blanket. He had almost died believing I hated him. The memory of his whispered, "Now I know," was the only thing holding my own shattering grief at bay. The pack's attitude had shifted completely. I saw Cole there once, his arms crossed, his usual scowl replaced by a look of grudging admiration. He had seen Kalen take a death blow for me. He had seen him rise and fight alongside our alpha. There was no greater proof of loyalty. The mercenary was gone. In his place was a hero who had bled for the Moonstone pack. On the 3rd day, his fingers twitched in mine. My head snapped up. His eyelids fluttered open, the brilliant blue dull with pain and exhaustion. He looked at me, his gaze hazy. "Luna," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. Tears I didn't know I still had pricked my eyes. "I'm here," I choked out, squeezing his hand. "I'm here." "Did we win?" "You saved us, Kalen," I told him, my voice thick with emotion. "You saved me." A faint smile touched his lips before his eyes drifted shut again, pulling him back into a deep, healing sleep. But it was enough. The chasm between us was gone, filled with the simple, undeniable truth of his sacrifice. Epilogue: The Storm and the Artificer. His healing was a slow, quiet affair. The magic he had used to knit his body back together had saved his life, but it had demanded a heavy price in return, leaving him drained to his very soul. For the first week, he did little more than sleep, his body fighting to reclaim the life force he had so recklessly spent. I never left his side. I cleaned his wounds, fed him broth when he was strong enough to wake, and sat for hours just watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, my hand clasped in his. Slowly, his strength returned. The light came back to his eyes, the color to his skin. Weeks later, life found a new rhythm, a new normal. The fortress was repaired, the last of the snows were melting from the lower peaks, and Kalen was a permanent, if unconventional, fixture in our lives. I found him on the balcony of our quarters, looking out at the vast expanse of the mountain range under a sky full of stars. He was leaning against the stone railing, and I came up behind him, wrapping my arms around his waist and resting my cheek against his strong back. He covered my hands with his own, his touch warm and familiar. "The wards are holding strong," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "Lyra is a talented weaver, a bit traditional for my tastes, but her foundations are solid." "Is that a compliment from the great Artificer?" I teased, smiling against his shirt. "It is an observation," he corrected, though I could hear the smile in his voice. He turned in my arms to face me, his blue eyes catching the starlight. He still looked like the charming, dangerous man who had walked into our fortress, but his entire world now revolved around me, a fact that was a constant, warm hum in my soul. Though I did add a few personal touches, a few surprises for anyone who might come knocking again. Kalen's expression grew serious. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch gentle. "I spent a very long time alone, Luna. I built my life like a fortress, with walls so high no one could ever get in." His eyes searched mine. I never realized how cold it was inside until I met you. I leaned into his touch, my heart full. My wolf, once a restless, yearning storm inside me, was finally, blissfully quiet, curled up and content in the presence of its mate. I finally felt whole. "You're home now," I whispered. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. "I am." He kissed me then, a slow, deep kiss that was not about passion or possession, but about peace. It was a promise of shared sunrises, of facing down threats together, of a future built by both of us. This is Vivienne's solace, and that's where we leave our fierce beta and her enchanting witch, two souls who proved that love doesn't follow rules, it writes its own. Thank you for letting me share their fire with you. Until next week, may you find your own unbreakable bond. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the shadows.